Speaker, I'm not sure where to start in this general debate. We've got the price of lemons and barnacle-clad ships of state, so we might as well start with talking about some of the contribution from the other side. And I have to say, it is awful to see a government that was in power for 9 years and to see one washed-up ex-minister after the other stand up and try and defend the indefendable and try and talk about the total vacuum of what there is over there in regard to policy going forward. 9 long years of Labor and 6 months or 15 months into opposition, and they've still got nothing to offer. So let's talk about what the Key-led government has done. First of all, let's start with the upcoming proposed and now legislated tax cuts that every Kiwi in New Zealand will enjoy. The average wage earner will be $15 a week better off as a result of those announcements, Mr Speaker. $15 a week. When you go into electorates like the Taranaki King Country, Mr Speaker, where families are in the lower socio-economic end of the income bracket, $15 a week is a substantial amount, and most of those households, and per household, of course, Mr Speaker, it's $15 for individuals. Per household, it's expected to be $25 a week. They will be the beneficiaries of that. When you look also, Mr Speaker, at what's happening with the top tax rates, we will see a much greater enthusiasm for people that are in the higher end of the income bracket, that want to live in New Zealand, that have family ties in New Zealand, that can lead the economy going forward, Mr Speaker, wanting to live here instead of moving away to Australia, where circumstances have been much better for them up until this point in time. Also, Mr Speaker, company tax, which is a substantial benefit to New Zealand. In the Taranaki King Country, most of the companies that we have are very small. There are a number of large ones, but most of them, the majority, are small companies, including farmers and trusts that go with that, and companies around farming enterprises, and they will be the beneficiary of this tax cut. So, Mr Speaker, when you look at that, when you look at what those incentives will do in terms of lifting economic growth, and you compare that with what we've had over the last 9 years of a Labor-led government, then clearly there is a parting of the ways. Clearly there will be an increase in where New Zealand can go with this, and clearly, Mr Speaker, it was time that the barnacle-clad ship of state led by the Labor government ran on the rocks, and surely they did. I heard one of my colleagues earlier on use an analogy with horses. Well, what I'm hearing from these washed-up ministers, ex-ministers over there, Mr Speaker, is clearly flogging a dead horse. It is dead, it is gone, it will never return, and long may that be the day. Agriculture, Mr Speaker, will be the leader in this economic growth, and the Primary Growth Partnership, which was announced earlier by this government, $140 million a year investment in government industry partnerships. Mr Speaker, this is the flagship of moving the agricultural sector out of what has been basically a commodity provider into a value-added production, and none more than what I see with the research that's going on with the merino industry. The wool industry, Mr Speaker, has been on the rocks for a long time. An industry that used to be worth over $1 billion, now down to about $500 million, with the exception of fine wools and the Icebreaker brand, Mr Speaker, which is the shining light within that industry, to give the ability to that industry now to figure out a way or do research into how to produce fine meat from the merino breed, Mr Speaker, would be a wonderful step forward for the meat and wool industry of New Zealand, and it's very heartening to see that they've partnered with the Primary Growth Partnership in a $45 million investment into looking at ways to do that, Mr Speaker. So this government is forward-looking, progressive, the former ministers that have spoken are backward-looking. Mr Speaker, this is a good...
The Honourable Shane